everybody who's participated in that, and especially all the guys who are joining us this morning. Let's kick off in India with Narendra Taneja, the leading energy expert in the country, well known to all there, connected to everybody. Narendra, your question, I know you know what it is this morning. President Biden thinks you're shaky. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I don't think that's his view, but when you
That's
look
what
at
he
the
said.
situation, when you look at the situation developing over Ukraine from New Delhi, it's a very different view. I mean, of course, you know what's happening to the people there. Ukraine being a democracy and India being the largest democracy, we are very concerned, and we have all sympathies with the people of Ukraine, and we have sent aid and we have sent whatever support we can. Minister has
But yet
spoken with Ukraine.
India has chosen not to join the sort of Western alliance, Japan, all of its security allies in this moment to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And why is that?
Now, you see, India is not a follower of West or the East. India is a huge country, the size of a continent, and we have our own worldview. You would appreciate that we are entitled to have our own worldview. What's happening
Yeah, but that's
in
why I'm
Ukraine
asking
is, of course,
what is it and why is
yeah.
it?
So allow me to complete. So of course we condemn it, democracy being invaded, and what's happening, the civilian targets, being on the radar of Russia, kids being killed, women being killed, apartment blocks being bombardment. I mean, who's going to accept it? No democracy is going to accept it. So of course it's condemned. No argument on that. But at the same time, our view is that what European Union is trying to do, what America is trying to do, what NATO is trying to do is fully understandable. But when we look at the NATO as an alliance, we look at the situation. Only yesterday we saw NATO abandoning Afghanistan. They are also human beings. Afghanistan is also an old civilization, and NATO was there for full 20 years, then abandoned and left them to, literally to vultures. So and that happened in our neighborhood. And let's not forget, Kabul used to be part of India a long time ago. So we know.
And is India going into Afghanistan to take up that humanitarian challenge?
Well, India has, if you look at the record, India has always been very supportive. And if you look at number of hospitals, IT centers, road construction and all that, the past 20 years when NATO was there, that job was mainly done by India. Go and look on the ground there, talk to the people there. Look at who built maximum hospitals, who built maximum IT centers, and so on and so forth. Second thing is that, second what is important at the same time is that look at overall situation over China. The way, for instance, we are very worried that if Russia is punished too hard, it will push Russia into the lap of China. And we are not very comfortable with that situation.
That horse has already left the stable, no?
Not true.
We saw that on the start of the Beijing Olympics. It was the bond was sealed. There is no limits.
Allow me to complete. That is not how we look at it. That's a view of America. We appreciate that, but that's not how we look at it. Russia, the Russia that we know, and we know Russia reasonably well, is a very important country. And Russia, there is a huge trust deficit between Russia and China. We know that there is a huge trust deficit. But China is basically, is with the West as long as it serves China's interest. The day China thinks it has arrived on its own, it doesn't need the West, they will dump the West. They will go their own way and challenge the West. We know that. And we have a long border with China. We know China better than, many other countries in the world. So we are worried about a situation where Russia and Russia is pushed into China's lap, and then they become a kind of, one country in the sense, one power. That will destabilize the entire region we are part of, and eventually the whole world. We are taking a long-term view. When President Biden says that India is shaky, he's complaining that India has not followed the camp. We have never been a camp follower. We have always had an independent foreign policy. We are with the people of Ukraine, but at the same time, we have also seen that people in NATO and Europe are complaining, protesting out of the street, but how many people have gone into Ukraine to help them? None. So that we understand their constraints. We know they don't want to start the Third World War, so we know their limitation, and we understand it. Similarly,
it sounds like President Biden just had it about right. That all sounds a little shaky. I'm sorry. I'm going to keep using that word. Put you on the spot.
One line.
Let me come back to you. Okay, go.
One line. You see, that's not the case. The point is that, as I said, India has never, ever been a follower. We are not a camp follower.
Well, I don't think, I mean, this is the word follower, I think, is a big word, and it's a somewhat.
You don't let me complete, my friend.
I am.
I don't have to agree with you to be on your show. I'm
bringing
different perspectives. I'm bringing different perspectives. We are home to 1.30 billion people. That's more than the United States and Europe put together. You got to hear me out. You see, that's how we look at it. What, for instance, when Western companies were going 24/7 into Russia, investing and pumping their economy, strengthen the economy, why didn't you listen to us then? You didn't. Why didn't you listen to others? That time it worked for you. You were happy with it. Today it doesn't work for you. You want the entire world to follow you. West is not the only pole in the world. There are other poles too in the world.
Why do you use the word follow, though? I don't understand that word. Why would it be follow? Why would India not come to its own independent view? That
is the independent view. We think that the United States is shaky. We think the West is shaky. They're not going and helping the people of Ukraine. They are sending money. They're sending weapons. They're not helping. It's happening in the middle of Europe, and Europe is shaky. How about that?
Yeah, well, I think that is very true. I agree 100%. But as you say, probably the Third World War is at stake, perhaps, if one was to militarily engage. Thank you, Narendra, for being so willing to take on those difficult questions. I appreciate that. Richard Ridoglia, sitting in the comfort of San Diego, CEO of Matrix Global Holdings. We're seeing oil prices this morning, Richard, knocking on the door of 120. Where we've had that big rise the early days of the war up above 130, then it sort of collapsed down with some sense that it might be over quickly, that Russian exports might not be disrupted, but now clearly we're moving firmly back up that mountain again. Where do you think it goes from here?
Thanks, Sean. Nice to be here. Narendra, I agree with you. I think the U.S. is shaky, and I'll come back to that later. If Sean, I'd like to address some of the things he said from a U.S. perspective, and I do agree with Narendra. A couple things. Today's price, if it settles here, will be the third highest price since the war began. Right. So let's put things. A couple other large things have happened. The Commitment of Traders report. I lived my life in the futures business for most of the decades I've been in the business. The Commitment of Traders report has seen a massive decline in open interest. I think a billion barrels of open interest have declined since the beginning of the war. Another fact is we've lost over 180 million of length from the large money managers and speculative traders. Those are large positions. What it portends is extreme volatility. A couple major things have happened. Margins for one contract have gone up 4x. So a position that used to be $4,000 for one future is now $12,000 to hold one futures contract of WTI. That means if a position you have on is a 100 lot, do the math. Plus, historically, the market might move 50 cents in a day. Now it's going to move $5 in a day. And so I think what we've seen is a complete we wash people in and out. That's how markets trade. You take people up. I think they have an opinion that, hey, it's going to be okay. We might have peace. The market flushes. But more importantly, it is the liquidation of positions that increases the volatility because there's less people to participate. My view of this market, going back a couple of years or going back a good year on this show, has been I thought we were headed up all along, given the green energy policies that have been in place. Now we're in a situation where we have seen significant retrenchment on CapEx. This was before OPEC Plus decided to remove 3 million barrels of Urals crude. So I think what we're experiencing and what we're seeing on the market, and we can see it in price, is we are now in a price band. It's probably $130 to $100. It's going to stay there until something dramatic happens. And one thing, I sit here making conversation and making talks. I didn't think we'd invade Ukraine. I didn't think Russia would invade Ukraine. So I think a lot of us have to be. I'm checking my hubris here before we even get into it, because I realize sometimes people make statements as if they have the opinion, but sometimes when you're wrong, you go back and say, I was wrong. I was wrong about that. But my view is we were headed higher anyway, based on OPEC plus. The fact now that we removed Urals barrels from the market, I think is so dramatic. I can't imagine. I just don't know where it's going to end.
Let's go to Rustin Edwards, head of fuel oil procurement, Euronav, sitting in Geneva, who may have a kind of a window on how much of that Saudi oil is or isn't being, or not Saudi, Russian oil is or isn't being picked up. Where are we seeing, or is there any sort of a crystal ball in the tankers and the tanker rates and so on? Rustin, where do you think this goes?
Well, I mean, if you're looking at the tanker markets right now, right now you see that the tanker rates have actually collapsed since the invasion. There was an initial rally, rates took off, and then as the invasion wore on, rates collapsed. Now that means that there are more ships than there are cargoes. Now, part of that problem is the fact that Russian oil is not sanctioned. It has yet to be sanctioned. So people can still freely trade it, pick it up, move it around. Yes, you would violate the social norms in some countries if you're a buyer and seller of those products, but nevertheless, the cargoes are moving. Espo crude, which had their big offtake tender about 5-6 days ago, cleared. All that oil got bought, and it's moving into China. So I think it is an issue right now of getting the logistics flows around the different crude flows and product flows rearranged to compensate for the ready availability of Urals crude into the European marketplace and other crudes displacing those crude, that Urals crude, so that Urals crude can go other places. Problematically, there's still issues with the German landlocked refiners and the Bulgarian refiners that rely solely on pipeline flow in from Russia as well as from Trieste. However, the Transalpine pipeline is only 850 kbd pipeline at max capacity. And with that, you have to feed a few other refineries along the way. So there's really no way that you can transship your way out of those landlocked refineries, which feed the majority of inland Europe. So Europe can't fully ban Urals crude. It can't fully ban Urals imports, but it can probably ban the usage of ports by Russian ships, forcing them to go other places with their cargoes, which I think those rearrangements are already happening. So it will take time for the logistics system to iron out how does that oil move.
Narendra, we had a pretty profound statement from Saudi Arabia overnight saying that they were not going to be the suppliers of more oil, that they're not responsible for the shortage in the market, and tied that very closely to the issue of the Houthis coming out of Yemen, firing missiles into the situation, into Saudi Arabia, and calling on the Americans to rebrand the Houthis as terrorists. My question to you, Narendra, is where these different issues are tied together, how do they get resolved as they get tied together? The Iran talks, ultimately we're at $120 oil, which I know for a country like India is very painful, as it is for most of the world. But how do we untangle this geopolitical spaghetti junction that's getting locked into its corner?
Well, interesting question. You see, in my personal view, I mean, any attack on any oil installation or gas installation in any country, any geography, should be considered a terrorist attack, irrespective of where that facility is located, where in the west, east, north, south, or wherever, because it's an attack on global economy. What happens, for instance, in Yemen, or what happens in Ukraine, or is basically the entire world is forced to pay for it, especially big, emerging economies like India, since our dependence on import is so high. The point is that, but what is going on in the Middle East, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and all that, we all know that there is a Shia-Sunni factor. There is Iran wants to be the dominant player there. They want to be the hegemon. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, they all want to be hegemon. Until yesterday, we all know that the United States was behind Saudi Arabia. Now there are reports United States wants also to prop up Iran as a hegemon, as a counterbalance. So, these are the games being played by developed countries, by so-called superpowers and big powers, like Russia, China, United States, and so on. And the entire world end up paying for it. Now, Russia invades Ukraine and the oil prices have gone up. The result is economy of even the most poor person on the planet is now adversely affected. Millions and billions are paying for what the kind of, adventures that Russia has got into, or misadventure. So now the point is that the oil, I personally feel the United Nations or some global intergovernmental organization need to step in and declare oil and gas and power transmission and all these strategic assets, in the sense central to the global economy. Any attack on any energy installation, the entire world must get together, condemn it, if necessary, take a military action against such things. I think it is so important. Look at what is happening now. But right now, it looks like the entire world, when it comes to oil and gas and energy, has become a banana republic. I mean, look what's happening in Ukraine. The world is simply kids being killed, women being killed, innocent people being killed, the entire world. What are they doing? Issuing a statement, targeting India, but doing nothing, absolutely. The entire world. Where is the UN? Except tweets, there is nothing. The same goes for energy. I personally think there should be an energy security council, like the Security Council. There should be an energy body. For instance, I have been talking about that in the world, we need a global organization dedicated to energy. You have global organization for sports, for health, for practically everything except energy, which is the most important. Why? Because the West doesn't want it. IEA doesn't want it. Now, the point here is that, this is the time when we need to address this issue. If we had a global organization, they would have immediately intervened, or at least facilitated some kind of intervention. We don't have that. You have for climate, but not for energy. Why? Ask this question in Washington, D.C., in Paris, in London, because the West does not want a global energy governance. It doesn't suit them.
Well, I suppose there is the IEA, there is the OPEC.
IEA is, no, listen, sorry.
Yeah.
Let me correct you. International Energy Organization is not a global organization. It's an organization which was created in response to the 1970s, embargo.
It's an OECD organization.
It's an OECD. So please don't call it a world organization. Anything located in the West does not automatically become global, the way you people think. That's not true. It's an international organization serving interests of only a very limited number of countries.
And there's the IEF in Riyadh. But
IEF is a beast without any teeth.
A beast without any teeth.
Yes.
Yes. Well, it has never.
Don't even count it.
Yeah, it has never really matured to the point. But I would like, when we come back to Narendra, just to think about how does this geopolitical spaghetti junction, how can it be unraveled? Or are we in this for a while? Richard, your thoughts on that? You said at the beginning of your earlier comment that the US is shaky. Ultimately, oil prices are soaring at a level because the geopolitical positions are getting entrenched. And we have Biden going to Europe this week to reinforce the kind of NATO Western position and keep it anchored. My question to you, Richard, from an American perspective, and I know you're not a geopolitical analyst, but from within America, I'm trying to understand what kind of political cover Biden has to kind of double down on this sort of face-off with Russia.
We're a split country. There are the right and the left does not want to hear one word what the right has to say. You hear the term cancel culture. It's cancel culture. Bill Maher, one of our kind of local comedians, who's a very, very liberal guy, is now turned to the left and said, I can't even talk to you anymore. You say Biden. Do you listen to Biden speak? Have you heard him hold full sentences? Do you watch him shuffle off the stage? What did Biden do when he started? And even under Obama, he stopped the Keystone Pipeline. It'd be running right now. He now is talking to Maduro about increasing production. He's asking for the JCPOA and the Revolutionary Guard to be recognized. And he calls the Saudis a pariah. And now he asks them to increase production. Assad, I just saw, visited the UAE today in your note. Biden is running OPEC, and he is literally blaming U.S. oil producers for the rise in price. I think we've elected a president. I know no one liked Trump anywhere outside, Republican areas of the United States.
Outside Orange County, he was.
Well,
No.
My guess is, you want to go there anytime. We can say, obviously, you didn't want Trump, and now you've got Biden. And what Rhonda is saying is true.
And generally,
there is no, Sean. He doesn't have any cover. He walked out of Afghanistan. He has no cover. He has done nothing to help you. At least they're saying he's doing Ukraine, but I think he's going to get there. And just like Kamala Harris, hopefully he doesn't embarrass himself.
Well, I think there is some data to maybe challenge your thesis in the sense that his popularity ratings and polling and so forth is generally improved since this crisis began, and he's getting some credit for aligning the Western and rehabilitating NATO.
No.
That seems to be, we'll see this week. Let me go to Rustin on that point, because that's the other part of this balance, Rustin, is where is Europe? How is Europe going to hold the line here as this oil price kicks in, as this crisis anchors in, and the pain of it economically to face off, to maintain this, and perhaps to go the next step of sanctioning Russian energy? How do you think Europe is holding and will hold on that posture?
Well, it's going to put a lot of things to test into question. I think the EU starts to meet on that today, probably for a 2-day summit to discuss what they can actually accomplish, what they can't accomplish. I mean, my thought is, again, you have the inland refineries inside of Germany and inside of Bulgaria that rely on 100% on Russian crude for the most part. They supply jet fuel, diesel, gasoline to the middle of Europe, which is Switzerland, Austria, Czech Republic, Slovenia, Germany. And if you cut those refineries off their crude supply, you're basically impacting the heartland of Europe, industrial production and food production, which can't be done at this point because the biggest issue Europe is facing down the road right now is food. Europe imports a lot of grain from Ukraine and Russia, and those imports aren't coming so far. So it is a bit of a conundrum that they're stuck in. So I think what we could see as a compromise position coming into the EU meeting is that the EU doesn't ban Russian oil per se, but the EU does ban Russian ships and Russian products from EU ports. Therefore, you can then have a de facto ban without actually banning and still allow the inland refineries to continue taking in Russian crude and continue to run. It's the worst.
By a pipeline or?
By a pipeline, the Druzhba pipeline. Druzhba pipeline, 1.5 million barrels a day of oil going into Europe that runs into 4 refineries in Germany, 1 refinery in Bulgaria, and there's very little way to replace that flow. And so if you limit the Russian oil imports into European ports, it doesn't impact the inland refineries. It keeps them running, keeps things moving.
Well, certainly, if you think of what the consequence of cutting off Russian gas would be, I mean, essentially industry in Europe would have to stop, or at least...
Well, actually, you can do a lot to circumvent that. I mean, you have to put the green agenda and put it into a lockbox at the moment. You have to get rid of the ETS. So you have to allow industry to burn alternative fuels and not be penalized for it. I mean, Europe can do a lot to increase diesel production if they got rid of the ETS trading and allowed the marginal barrel to go into the European refinery and let the European refinery, instead of running on natural gas, run on fuel oil production that's produced inside the refinery and meet the local diesel demand. Europe used to have a fairly good large refinery run rate, but with refinery runs at 80 to 82% utilization instead of 92% utilization, you miss out on a lot of products that could be used to supplement Russian imports into the country.
Let's go to the survey question and get the view of everyone else regarding this sort of simple question. How long will Russia's war in Ukraine last? Weeks, months, or years, i.e. more than a year, which I think the sense of where that time horizon is will really start to determine where things are anchoring in.
Well, that question also depends on what your definition of a war is.
Well, what it is at the moment, I suppose, ultimately.
Because you could easily say that war has been going on since 2014.
Well, you could, but I think this is war. What we were seeing up to then was occupation, I would say, in certain sections. So war being what we're seeing on our 6 o'clock news at the moment would be my sense of things. Narendra, as we look to that sense of time horizon, that this could last a while, Bosnia, Sarajevo, we haven't really even seen Kiev being assaulted yet, which of course is the capital city. How does a long version of this, you said in the previous, I think you were here a month ago or less, that Europe and America getting bogged down in a war with a declining power like Russia has consequences for Asia. In the likelihood that this looks like it will drag on, what do you think the consequences for that thesis is that you articulated last time?
Well, my friend, my view is that weaponizing oil is not a smart idea. It's a very bad idea because look at United States is energy independent. China produces 9 million barrels of oil. That's the oil they produce in China, plus equity oil that they have in different geographies. Brazil is independent. Most large economies are independent, except some parts of Europe, and of course the biggest is India, the third largest oil market in the world. So it's going to be a lot of pain for us. You can understand that. If you see me a little bit angry, you just try to understand what's happening in Ukraine. We are already paying in billions of dollars every week for that, for what they did in what Russia did to Ukraine, and how Western countries are responding to it. So my own sense is that to me it looks like, being very honest, that it seems that mood is to teach Russia a lesson and not to find a solution over Ukraine or of the Ukraine crisis. I think the world should focus on finding a solution and not teaching Russia a lesson. Lesson for what? And to what conclusion? Are you basically trying to convert Ukraine into a new Afghanistan, where Europe would get bogged down for years and years and years to come? And China will use that opportunity to rise and challenge the United States, not in 20 years, but in 3 years? Do we want that kind of situation? Destabilize the whole of Asia?
But $120 oil will also be very painful for China, right? And every other commodity.
Let me answer it. You see, China gets roughly 15% of total requirement of Russia. If India is not buying, and we are not buying, in the last 3 months, we have bought only 1% of our total requirement of oil from Russia. Don't trust the Financial Times, which says India is going to buy 40% on all. There's no truth in it. The fact is, last 3 months, we bought less than 1%. We have a huge refinery in India owned by Rosneft, a Russian company. Even they don't import more than 2% of oil from Russia's own company does not do that. So please, the cold fact. Now, the fact is that, if, for instance, oil and natural, they are weaponized. And basically, the mission is not to find a solution of Ukraine, which is in the best interest of the people of Ukraine, but to convert a kind of, to basically develop a kind of situation where Europe gets completely bogged down, that we want energy dependence and actually buy more oil and gas from the United States, which probably some of companies in the United States want. Now, is that an ideal situation? It is not. The point is that, the point here is we should try to find a solution. And solution is that why can't some prominent leaders, not necessarily president or prime minister, big name statesmen who are highly respected in western part of the world, eastern part of they get together, charter a plane and go to Moscow and talk with the president of Russia? Why don't they do it? Why only prime ministers serving prime minister and president? Why can't statesmen like figures from sports, from journalism, writers and others, they can just go to Moscow and talk? We need to find a solution. Innocents are being killed. That's the approach. No, that's not. Sanctions. They've imposed sanctions against Iran. What happened? Has Iran disappeared from the face of this planet? It has not. So we got to learn something. Sanction is the only thing. If sanction is the only tool you have got in your hand, sorry, you're reading from the wrong book. That's not going to find a solution. Turning Ukraine into Afghanistan will be a disaster for the entire humanity, not only for the West. Don't do that, please. Reach out. Sit down with President Putin. All those, if the prime ministers and president can't do, President Biden can't do, there are hundreds of statesmen, I'm sure, in the United States, in Canada, in western part of the world. There are quite a few in eastern part of the world. Why can't they get together? Why can't they be a private, independent initiative so that to find a solution? Because politicians have failed. Politicians of the West know only one thing: sanctions, nothing else.
They certainly have brought us to this point. Richard, time running out, obviously, but your thoughts of where this goes, and again, back to the U.S. position, does this drive Biden's green agenda into the ditch, more oil production in the US, more energy independence between Canada, Mexico, the US, energy independence, and so on. Where does this go, do you think?
My sense, if the Ukraine war ended today, that we would be back in the green agenda, full stop. Full stop. We'd be there talking about oil companies quit producing oil. I'm sorry we invested the money to put new rigs in place, but guess what? We're going to go back the other way now. I don't think there's a logical way. Narendra is exactly right. He is saying exactly right. No, there are no adults in charge. Angela Merkel, who was she was the Benoit, the belle of the ball for so long. How far did that get her? Where is Germany now? I just am amazed that we're talking about policy where it's being run by people in our current State Department, where they literally are not allowing leases on federal land. You cannot make this up. You cannot make this up. Rustin said it. Energy and food are what bring a peaceful world together. And we have one part of the world believes that in the US, it is the most vocal part, that you should drive a Tesla. That's what it believes, because that's going to make the world a better place.
Couldn't make Elon Musk very rich, already rich. Can't make him any richer. Right. How rich can you be?
Not much richer than that.
No, you can't. Rustin, last word with the survey result on here. So the room is generally in the months category. I myself think this could drag, but beyond that, Rustin, looking at the possible areas of where price might start eroding, not because of supply concerns, but because of demand concerns, i.e. China. What is your shipping crystal ball telling us about the situation in China, the COVID lockdowns, supply chain lockdowns?
Well, I've been the biggest drum beater that the global recession is here. And I'm saying that we're in the midst of the start of the global recession. Shipping rates and supply chains are getting decimated because you have two big issues. You have the Russian export issues, which is locking in freight, locking in boxes, locking in export cargoes that go to the world. You've got China with the COVID lockdowns, and COVID has not gone away. I mean, as much as people are ignoring COVID, it is still here and it is raging in a lot of different places around the world. China's current lockdown is widely, it had press last week. It's now kind of being ignored, but they continue to lock down more and more people as the cases of COVID and the case incentive rates keep going up. And that is basically delaying exports out of the east coast of Asia. There are delays out of west coast of Asia, of Europe. And those two bookends of the world are basically going to grind logistic chains lower. Container freight rates are still strong, continue to be strong. High fuel cost is hampering a lot of other freight markets right now. When you've got $1,000 a ton for fuel to move a ship from point A to point B, and you don't have the corresponding freight numbers to offset that high fuel cost, you're basically losing flow of raw materials around the world. It's going to impact us all, and expect to see major price increases this way going forward. Inflation is not transitory. It is not going away. It is going to hurt, and it's going to hurt us all very hard in the next 4 to 6 months.
On that jolly note, we will be taking a pause, and thank you very much. Narendra, as always, your insights are awesome. Rustin, thank you very much from that sea in Geneva. The Lake of Geneva has grown to include tankers. Richard, as always, we must get a view of that lovely Southern California behind you. I know it's nighttime, of course.
It's 11:30, but as we say in California, Calabunga.
Yeah, right? Exactly. We'll have to get a facade background. Anyway, thank you guys all very much.
Thank you.
We're gone a little over, as we have each session this week for obvious reasons, but we'll wrap it up there and catch up with everybody 10:30 UAE time. All the best. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.